everybody. Nick's off this week for the 4th of July, but I'm here trying to keep the momentum going a little bit. Hopefully, give you a little bit of content here this 4th of July week. And for some of you people who are at the beach, hopefully this is something that'll sort of keep you entertained while you're out there enjoying your time off. So, a couple of housekeeping items to start with. Please like and subscribe the Read and Reaction YouTube channel. That helps us out. If we can get up to 1,000 subscribers before the season starts, then it can really start to generate some revenue for us, which is going to help generate more and more of this content. So if you like what you're listening to here, like what you're seeing here, please like and subscribe. Also, there are going to be a couple articles coming up on readandreaction.com. Right now, there's one up there detailing where Florida's explosive plays are going to be coming from in 2021 that I've written. And then Nick has a couple from his Give 'em Hell Pell series that are going to be going up later this week. So please go over and check that at www.readandreaction.com. So let's get to it. So 2 bits. It's been 4 years. I was just tweeting about this the other day. It's been 4 years since the credit card scandal that really sort of rocked that 2017 season and led to the departure of Jim McElwain. And one of the things that was interesting is thinking about how far we've come since that 2017 season. So you think about Jim McElwain, they go 4-7 that year. You've got sort of the introduction against Michigan that just turns into a disaster after a couple of seasons that have been pretty good with McElwain in charge, where they'd gone to the SEC championship game, but hadn't really been able to recruit at a level that meant that they were going to be able to consistently compete with Alabama. It's interesting because we've come very, very far from that, right, with Dan Mullen the last 3 years, but also so far from that because still losing to Alabama in the SEC championship game in 2020. But you think about Jordan Scarlett being lost for that game, Felipe Franks starting his first game, and all the turnover that happens in college football in 4 years. And I think it's undoubtedly true that Florida is in a better position 4 years from now than they were back in 2017. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to say that, but considering, there's a lot of criticism that goes on, and we'll get into it a little bit later in this episode about Jim McElwain's recruiting and then also Dan Mullen's recruiting. But it's undoubtedly true that Dan Mullen has been a better recruiter than Jim McElwain ever was, just from a high school perspective, but then also all the transfers that he's brought in through the transfer portal have really helped the roster overall as well. And then just the conversion and the hit rate, right? That a guy like Kyle Pitts, a guy like Kyle Trask, a guy like Kadarius Toney can all become real stars on this team, even though they have very different recruiting profiles, very different talent profiles, really is a credit to Dan Mullen, what he can do on the offensive side of the ball. But it was just really interesting because 4 years ago, I was just getting into this back in 2017. It just started interacting with Gator Dave with Gators Breakdown. And I was sitting out in my driveway getting a bunch of messages and sort of innuendo from different people that the credit card scandal was about to hit. No one could really give me details, but they were telling me it was going to be bad. And so yesterday I was sitting out there for the 4th of July enjoying it with some of the same people who'd been over here a couple of years ago and just sort of having flashbacks to what that was 4 years ago. So again, the Gator program, considerable strides since 2017. I think sometimes it's a good opportunity to take a step back and sort of say, hey, where were we back then? Where are we now? Whenever we start looking at some of the warts that might come along with the Dan Mullen era, because certainly there are a lot of benefits that have come along with the Dan Mullen era as well. And when I tweeted the 4 years that it had been 4 years, one of the things I did was take a GIF from one of Jim McElwain's Belk commercials. So certainly, if you remember those were pretty cringeworthy, and thankfully we don't have to deal with those anymore. But it's been a long ride since 2017, been a long ride since 2008, really. But the Gator program's getting back to where it is, and Dan Mullen is where it belongs, and Dan Mullen's a big part of that. So 4 bits. We got the name, image, and likeness really came out this week, and it was funny to see people talk about it potentially being like the end of college football. And I think what we sort of found is that it's a little bit, obviously you've got Barstool out there who's signing athletes pretty extensively. You've got some other Gator entities that are going after players directly to get them in as sponsors. But then you've also got players who have started selling t-shirts. Emory Jones got a really cool t-shirt that he's selling out there through, I think Quincy Avery is his quarterback coach who's helping with that. But you start looking at it, and it's great that these guys can do that and can monetize that. But I think you're also going to figure out who's really the marketing guys of the players and who's not, because I can tell you, as just a matter of fact, you're not going to pay your way through college. You're not going to make a whole lot of money selling t-shirts out there. I mean, you can do it, and that's great that you've got an audience. But at the end of the day, the conversion rate from the people who like you to the people who actually buy something is relatively low, even if you're doing good things, even if you're a player. Now, certainly there's going to be some questions about who can support whom and all those sorts of things. And I do expect that players are going to make more money than they did before, obviously, but you got to be a little bit careful what you wish for, because tax implications start coming in as players start thinking about potentially unionizing, collective bargaining, and all those sorts of things. The cost of a scholarship for a guy who's, say, the second string offensive tackle is really a significant, it's probably significantly more money than he could make as just using his name, image, and likeness out there. So as long as it's an as long as these players are adding the name, image, and likeness dollars associated with their image to the scholarship, I think is probably going to be a net positive for everybody in college football. The worry I have is that as players demand, and rightly so, right, that the players demand more and more of that pie, especially the star players, you're going to start to see, I think, moving away from the scholarship as a means of compensating. And I do worry that in some respects that scholarship, not only near term but long term, has worth to people, as opposed to if you're just getting a piece of the money now. It's a lot of money. There's no doubt about that, right? There's no way you can look at a coach like Dan Mullen, who's getting all that money paid to him, and say his players don't deserve any of that. The question is, how do you divide that up? And the NCAA is going to be grappling with that. The SEC is going to be grappling with that. College football is going to be grappling with all of that. But I think maybe the positive thing to come out of the name, image, and likeness launch is that all of these things can be done in a way that don't harm the product, or at least make the product better overall. If the players are happier, if the players like going out there and selling their name, image, and likeness, if they feel like that freedom is worthwhile to them, then I don't know that there's really a downside to it, assuming that you can prevent some of the large scale booster type interactions and those things that would benefit one school over another. And I'm not sure you're going to be able to completely eliminate that, but let's be honest, those boosters have influence on who goes where, regardless of whether it's above board or below board. And that's just something that's sort of inherent with college football when you've got this kind of money going out there. So 6 bits. Mullen was out wakeboarding. If you looked at his social media accounts this week, heard a couple of people complaining a little bit, not that much, but complaining that he was out there wakeboarding rather than recruiting. I mean, here's the reality. It's a dead period. And so his staff needs to go out and needs to take some time off and needs to get sort of re-energized for what's coming up. At the same time, you do hope that there has been a plan put in place that even though these guys are on vacation, the things that they are permitted to do when it comes to recruiting, that they're going to be able to do. And I don't really have any doubt that that's the case. So, there are people out there who will use every little thing that goes up on social media from Dan Mullen to say he could be doing something better. And look, I am just as critical of his recruiting as many other people out there are, though I've become less so in the last couple of years. And we'll talk about that in just a second, but I've become less critical of it just because it is what it is at this point. And so he's got his plan in place. He's going to go after the players he wants to go after. And we're going to see, right? I mean, at the end of the day, we're going to see. We know that Urban Meyer had a way to win, and that way involved bringing in top tier recruiting classes and top tier speed. Mullen's starting to bring in some of that top speed. You look at a guy like Isaiah Bond and some of the other guys who've come in this 2022 class or who've already committed, and you're starting to see that a little bit. At the same time, it's being done in a different way. And that doesn't mean it's the wrong way. It just means it's a different way. And we're going to sort of have to see how that works out. And Mullen has always been somebody who sort of moves to the beat of his own drum. And I think that's going to be the case. And that's one of the reasons why, he can be off-putting to some people, but I think that's also why he can be endearing to some people, that there is a benefit to not listening to the masses when the masses are wrong. There's a benefit to listening to them when they're right. And so, when it comes to recruiting, I think it's pretty convincing that the recruiting rankings matter and that for the most part, people are right. At the same time, that doesn't mean that Mullen's way of developing and Mullen's way of sort of giving his staff some space to have a real life isn't a better way of doing it. I mean, think about it. If you're not the best person out there at your profession, that's not necessarily a failure. If you have good balance with your family, I think all of us sort of strive for that sort of stuff. And many people out there who are ambitious and who want to do a really good job in life do have to grapple that question of, how much is too much, and am I spending enough time with my family, and all those sorts of things. And Mullen has to deal with that too, and he has to deal with that with his assistant coaches. And you think about a guy like Christian Robinson, who got married this week, and congratulations to C Rob for that. But you think about that, he's able to go and get married. He was thinking about going to Michigan. I don't think there's any doubt about that there were some offers for him to go out to Michigan, and he decides to stay at Florida. And you wonder, does he decide to stay because Mullen has created an environment where it's like a family as opposed to being mercenaries? And sometimes being a mercenary is the right thing, sometimes being a family is the right thing. Again, it's a question of how do you want to build. And so, anybody getting overly excited about any of the wakeboarding or any of the vacation pictures that Mullen sent out, I think is a little bit misplaced. But certainly, when you do that, when you put those sorts of things out on social media, when you make some of the comments that Mullen's made, particularly after the Oklahoma game, these things start to get exasperated. And I think you see that with some of the fan base who sees some of the other incidents, sees the team not being able to get over that hump, at least when it comes to Alabama. And worries a little bit. So, hey, Mullen gets to prove it, right? I mean, in 2021, he's going to get Alabama, he's going to get Georgia, he's going to get LSU. You go 3-0, 2-1, and everybody's really, really happy. You go 1-2 or 0-3, and everybody starts blaming the recruiting, starts blaming the vacation. So that's just the way it works when you get paid the way Mullen gets paid. But it's good to see him out there. Good to see him. In my opinion, it's good to see that there's a balance that's being associated with the players or with the coaches. Making sure that those guys don't have to make some of the sacrifices maybe that are made in other programs where it's just work all the time. So $1, we're going to finish it up here with a 2022 recruiting update. I know a lot of people are a little bit pensive about the way Florida's recruiting has been going. I would say that is probably a reasonable thing to do. When you look at it, I think Florida is 26th in the overall 24/7 rankings. And that's something that obviously isn't going to be good enough, but at the same time isn't necessarily something that's going to hold, right? So Florida right now is sitting at 26, but only has 10 commits, right behind Georgia Tech. And there's a big difference between those classes. Florida has 5 4-stars, 4 3-stars, and then a kicker. Georgia Tech has 11 commits, 4 4-stars, 7 3-stars. The difference in the player rankings for 24/7 is 90.05 to 87.30. However, if you go to 24th, which is Clemson, they have 8 commits, but that's 7 4-stars, 1 3-star, 92.02 is the rating. USC is 23rd with only 8 commits, but they got 2 5-stars, 3 4-stars, 3 3-stars, 92.37 that rating. So if you think about it, Florida, at this point in time, you really need to be looking at average player ranking, not overall ranking, just because the number of commits is so varied. So Mississippi State's a great example. They've got 14 commits, 14 3-stars, 86.96 is the rating. Florida is going to jump way up above them. Virginia Tech, my other alma mater, 16 3-stars, no 4-stars, 17 total commits, 85.81. Tech is going to stay right around 20th as teams like Florida go flying by. The teams you got to really look for, Missouri only has 11 commits, but they've got 6 4-stars, 5 3-stars. Drinkwitz's doing a really good job there, 90.28. Florida really can't afford to get out recruited by Missouri. And as of right now, Missouri's still a little bit ahead with 1 more commit. Alabama sitting at 14th, but they're at 93.62 overall, so we can imagine they're going to end up in the top 5 pretty soon. Texas A&M, 1 5-star, 7 4-stars, 2 3-stars, 92.75. Again, that's just a little bit behind Alabama, probably going to end up 4th or 5th overall. You got Georgia, if we keep going in the SEC, Georgia's at 93.38, 1 5-star, 9 4-stars, 1 3-star, 11 total commits. So they're probably going to end up in the top 3 as well. LSU, 3 5-stars, 6 4-stars, 2 3-stars, 93.63. Florida State is number 4 with 15 commits. This is a little bit of a mirage because they've got 2 5-stars, 5 4-stars, 8 3-stars, and then 89.88. Though I've mentioned a little bit on my Gator Country articles that I do, that they are sort of following the 5-3 theory that I had laid out on readandreaction.com. So they've got Travis Hunter, a 5-star, the 2nd ranked player overall. Sam McCall, 5-star, 28th ranked player. They've got AJ Duffy, who's 74th. And then they've got a couple of guys ranked in the low 200s. And then all of a sudden, 351, 359, 436, 461, 464, all the way up to their last guy who's at 853. So they're not bringing in guys who are ranked like 1,500. They're bringing in guys who are ranked in that 400, 500, 600 range, and those guys tend to become NFL players at about the same rate. And then if we keep going up, Ohio State is sitting at 94.62, 4 5 stars, 10 4 stars, 2 3 stars, and 16 commits. It probably would be good enough if they get no more commitments for a top 5 recruiting class. And they're going to get some more commitments because they've got space for 9 more. Ryan Day doing a great job there. So, if you look at it, I don't think Florida passes LSU. I think they probably narrowly edge out Florida State based on the number of commitments. They're not going to pass Georgia. They're not going to pass Texas A&M. They're not going to pass Alabama, and really they're going to be fighting with Missouri and maybe USC and Clemson. They're probably not going to pass them either. So you're again looking at a team that's going to finish somewhere in the 9th to 12th spot in the overall recruiting rankings. And that's where we've been for the past few years. I don't know, the 90.05 is actually the lowest, I think, in the Mullen era of overall recruiting rankings. So I expect he's going to get some momentum as the summer goes. He's going to bring in some higher level guys. But if you look at last year, they were 90.31. You look at 2020, they were right in that range as well, 90.74. 2019, 90.56. So at the end of the day, it just, 2018, 90.75. So at the end of the day, the team is recruiting at the exact same level year after year after year after year. And teams around them are recruiting at higher levels. So LSU is doing a much better job in the recruiting trail this year. Texas A&M has really picked things up since Jimbo Fisher came to town. And the SEC is just getting more and more difficult, and Florida's sort of sitting there at that talent level. Again, that doesn't mean that Mullen's not going to be able to win with the guys that he's got. He's proven that his development is pretty significant. But at the same time, he also proved when he was at Mississippi State that he wasn't necessarily beating LSU, Auburn, and Alabama all the time. Granted, the talent level is higher at Florida than it ever was at Mississippi State. But at the same time, the teams that he struggled with were the teams that recruited higher than he did, which is true for every program. I mean, if you look at a team like Wisconsin, they struggle with Ohio State. You look like a team like Michigan, they struggle with Ohio State. You look at all the teams in the ACC, none of them are any good, but they all struggle with Clemson. You look at the teams in the Pac-12, Clay Helton a little bit has sort of brought them back to the pack a little bit, but most of the time it's been a struggle against USC because they're sort of the elite dog out there when it comes to recruiting, and the same with Oklahoma, and then to a lesser extent Texas in the Big 12. So all of this to say that the 2022 class looks about on par with where the 2021 is, where the 2020 was, where the 2019 was, where the 2018 was. If you thought those were good enough, if you thought a top 10 class was good enough for those years, then you're probably pleased with what's going on. If you don't think that that's good enough for the SEC for a team like Florida, then you're going to see it the same way. But really, at the end of the day, it is, it's a question of beauty's in the eye of the beholder. Do you trust Mullen to develop these guys? And we're going to have to, right? And the historical outliers for teams that have not recruited at a top 5 level in the SEC and have won and in the country and have won national championships are teams that have had guys who are elite level quarterbacks, guys like Cam Newton and other examples like that. And certainly those guys have started to show up at places like Clemson and Alabama, which is one of the reasons why those teams have been so good. But at the same time, that is the formula. And so it's going to have to be Emory Jones, or it's going to have to be Anthony Richardson, or it's going to have to be Nick Evers, who come in and really become that program-changing quarterback who changes the overall perception of the team. And then the recruiting picks up because you're winning championships. Because without the championships, I don't know that people are coming. I think you're going to have to win the championships with the elite quarterback play to get people to come. So that's it for this week. Thanks again. Appreciate you tuning in. Hopefully you enjoyed this solo effort. Nick will be back next week to give me some balance, and then you won't have to hear my voice the whole time through. But again, please appreciate everybody who's tuned in, everybody who's subscribed. Thank you so much for supporting us. And if you haven't yet, please like and subscribe to the Read and Reaction YouTube channel. That helps us out. And hopefully we'll keep this coming all the way through the year, so you'll get more reactions to Mullen's Monday press conferences and sort of what's happened the week before, all during the season. So this is sort of an abbreviated version of Stand Up and Holler. Appreciate everybody taking the time to watch this, and hopefully this has been enjoyable in your 4th of July week. Hopefully everybody's out there having a good vacation, getting that same balance that Mullen had earlier this week. So with that, I'll be saying goodbye, and go Gators.
Thank you for watching this episode of Stand Up and Holler. Be sure to subscribe to the Read and Reaction YouTube channel, join our Patreon community at Read and Reaction for bonus content each week, and check out our website at readandreaction.com. I'm Nick Knutson, joined by Will Miles, and as always, go Gators.